3 days before Christmas, I got a call from my mom while I was standing in the kitchen making coffee. It was the kind of call that sends a chill down your spine from the very first second, a long silence on the other end, like the caller is struggling to swallow a decision too heavy to speak aloud. I spoke first, my voice barely a whisper. "Mom?" There was a sigh. Then my mother spoke, her voice trembling but trying to stay calm. "Angela, I think you shouldn't come home for Christmas this year." I nearly dropped the coffee cup in my hand. "What are you talking about?" "I know it's hard to hear, but your stepfather Frank and his parents are coming. They don't want to see you." I stood frozen. The tiny kitchen suddenly felt colder than ever. Frank, my mom's second husband, had been part of our lives since I was 11. His parents, the grandparents of his son, had never liked me. But this was the first time my mother openly chose them over me. "We always spend Christmas together," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Every year since Dad passed. It's our tradition." Mom didn't respond right away. The silence stretched, twisting something inside me. Finally she spoke, hesitant. "Angela, they said if we stay in touch with you, they'll cut Frank out of the will. They'll cut ties with all of us. Do you understand?" I felt my heartbeat pounding, each thump echoing in my chest like a warning bell. "So this is about money," I blurted out, my voice rising. "It's not just money," Mom said quickly. "They think you've been out of our lives for a long time. I told them we're not in contact anymore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want me to pretend I don't exist?" "Just this once," my mom pleaded. "Angela, they're stubborn and they hold grudges. We have to make them believe no one in the family is connected to you anymore. Please try to understand." I cut her off. "No. You want me to erase myself from the family to secure a promise in some will? Is that the price you've put on me?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I could hear it in her shaky breath. She knew she'd gone too far, but she wasn't turning back. I couldn't continue the conversation. I hung up. I collapsed onto the sofa, still clutching the phone. My chest ached like someone had sliced open an old scar that hadn't fully healed. For years, I thought I had accepted it all. My mom's remarriage, Frank always treating me like an outsider, and never truly being part of their new family. But I never thought Mom would go this far. Would choose the people who ignored me, belittled me to my face, just to protect a clause in a will that didn't even exist yet. I thought back to all those winters, me and Mom walking down streets lit with Christmas lights, sipping hot chocolate and talking about our little family of just the two of us. Back then, after Dad died in a car crash, she'd hold me close and promise, "No one will ever replace your dad in my heart, and you are the most precious thing I have." And now, I was the one being pushed out. I stared at the phone, my mind spinning between past and present. Then I opened my contacts and called the only person I knew would understand. Natalie, my half-sister. No one knew the twisted dynamics of this family better than she did. The phone rang for barely 3 seconds before someone picked up. Natalie's cheerful voice came through. "Angela? What's going on? You're calling so early." I swallowed hard. "Mom just called," I said, my voice catching. "She told me not to come home this year, because Frank's parents will be there." A heavy silence. Then Natalie snapped, "What the heck? Is she serious?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Dead serious. And she told me to pretend I never existed." Natalie's voice sharpened. "If you're not welcome, then I'm not going either. They can't treat you like that and expect everything to be okay." I bit my lip as hot tears began to spill down my cheeks. Natalie, the only person in the family who never turned her back on me, was still standing by me, like she always had. That was when I realized Christmas this year wouldn't be like every other. But at least, I wouldn't be alone. I lost my dad when I was 5. A crash on the highway while he was on his way to pick me up from preschool. Mom never talked much about that day, only quietly tucked his old leather wallet into a drawer and kept it there for years. From that day on, it was just the two of us. Winters in Seattle got colder, but Mom always tried to make me feel warm. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor, where sea winds sometimes howled through the old window panes. Even without much money, Mom always baked gingerbread cookies for the holidays and turned the living room into a wonderland of twinkling lights and paper reindeer. I grew up in a love that wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Everything changed when I was 11, when Mom met Frank at a local book fair. He was a quiet man working in tech, a widower with a daughter my age named Amanda. At first, I thought it was great to have a sister, even if not by blood, someone to study and play with. Amanda lived with Frank in a spacious house in Bellevue, and when Mom moved in with them, I thought I was stepping into a new life. But it didn't take long to realize things weren't what I'd hoped. Amanda had a bedroom twice the size of mine. She had a full set of gaming consoles, the latest iPad, and her own Pomeranian, while I got a converted storage room next to the laundry. Frank kept his distance, always polite but cold. But what hurt most was how Amanda's grandparents, Frank's parents, treated me. They visited almost every weekend, showering Amanda with hugs and gifts, while I got a nod from across the room. Once I overheard them telling Mom, "Angela seems like the kind of kid raised without proper discipline. Girls without fathers usually are." They said it like I wasn't standing right behind the door. I'd told Mom everything. She just stayed silent, her eyes briefly sad. "They're old, honey. A little strict," she said, then turned back to chopping vegetables, avoiding my gaze. Amanda and I had some good times together. We did homework, played games, even made a secret club under the dining table. But as we grew older, Amanda started treating me like an outsider. She'd mock the way I talked, call my clothes outdated, and share my private stuff with kids at school. When I fought back, Mom told me to be patient. "You're the one who came later." Then came the summer I was 14. Mom and Frank went on a 2-week trip to Napa Valley, leaving me and Amanda with her grandparents. Usually, I'd stay with Aunt Lena, Mom's sister, but she was away on business. Amanda's grandparents reluctantly agreed to watch us, on the condition that I didn't cause trouble. Everything unraveled after just 4 days. It rained nonstop, so we were stuck indoors. Amanda hogged the computer all day for games, and I just wanted 1 hour to work on my essay. We argued, pushed each other. I didn't mean to, I swear I didn't. But Amanda slipped on the carpet, hit the coffee table, and screamed in pain. She clutched her arm, crying like her whole world had shattered. Her grandparents rushed in, their faces pale when they saw her swollen arm. Without asking, her grandmother grabbed the phone and shouted into it, "That girl attacked my granddaughter! She needs a mental evaluation immediately!" I stood there, heart pounding, trying to explain it was an accident. But no one listened. When the ambulance came, I was locked in the bedroom, the door bolted from the outside. Dinner was slid through the crack with a suspicious glare. I felt like a prisoner in what was supposed to be my home. Mom and Frank came back earlier than planned. No one hugged me, no one asked if I was okay. Amanda whispered that I had pushed her with all my strength, and her grandparents confirmed I'd shown dangerous behavior. Mom avoided my eyes and Frank shook his head. "I don't think I can let her be around Amanda anymore," he said. I was sent to live with Aunt Lena for 2 months. During that time, Mom arranged for me to see a therapist. They called it preventive, but I knew better. They thought something was wrong with me. I stayed silent, no tears, no protest. But inside, I began to build walls. After that summer, I no longer felt like the house in Bellevue was my home. It was someone else's house, where I was just a temporary guest. And Mom, the one who once promised she'd always protect me, was now the first to let go when things got complicated. I left right after graduating high school, carrying an old suitcase and a full scholarship from the University of Minnesota. Mom didn't see me off at the bus station. Frank didn't bother to say goodbye. Only Natalie ran after me, shoved a bag of chocolate cookies into my hand and whispered, "Text me when you get there, okay?" Minneapolis greeted me with golden autumn leaves. I rented a tiny room near campus and worked part-time at the student cafe while attending classes. I knew I couldn't expect any support from Mom, so I didn't allow myself to fall behind. Every penny I spent came from sweat and tears. 4 years of college passed in all-nighters, late shifts, and quiet cries under the blanket whenever I missed Natalie, but I never once regretted it. I majored in business administration and quickly discovered I had a knack for market analysis and organizational strategy. Everything changed when I met Zoe, a classmate and the daughter of the owner of Pine Grove Kitchen restaurant chain. Zoe was nothing like the rich girls I had known. She was genuine, sharp, and openly admitted she was under a lot of pressure after her father handed her the reins of the business following his retirement. One day, after we wrapped up a presentation on supply chain optimization in the F&B industry, Zoe pulled me aside and asked, "Angela, would you be interested in interning at Pine Grove? We could really use someone with your organizational mind." I said yes immediately. No one knew that a single nod would mark the turning point of my life. At first, I was just an intern, handling documents and weekly reports. But after 3 months, I proposed a plan to revamp the menu based on seasonal consumer behavior. We cut over 20 unprofitable items and focused on flexible, customizable dishes. Sales increased by 18% in just 1 quarter. After graduation, Zoe offered me the position of her executive assistant. I moved to the headquarters in Chicago and became her right hand in every development project. Together, we transformed Pine Grove from a dated restaurant chain into a dynamic ecosystem: electric bike delivery services, weekly healthy meal plans, and co-working spaces inside the restaurants, where people could eat and work at the same time. Chain-wide revenue rose nearly 40% in 2 years. Media started mentioning me in articles about young female leaders reshaping the F&B industry. I still lived simply, rented a small apartment, drove the same old car from college, and cooked my own dinners every night. Then one day, Mom called. I still remember that sound, the ringtone buzzing while I was reviewing the quarterly revenue report. I hesitated for a few seconds before picking up. "Angela?" Mom's voice was so quiet, I thought it was the wind. I don't think that's what it was. I waited. "Frank, he just got laid off. We've been trying everything for months, but we can't cover the mortgage anymore. They're about to foreclose the house." I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe an apology. But none came. Frank got on the phone next. His voice was low and tired. "Angela, I know I haven't been fair to you in the past, but right now we really need your help." I was silent for a long time. Then finally I said, "I'll send the money to cover the mortgage, but that doesn't mean I've forgiven you." From that month on, I transferred a fixed amount to Mom's mortgage account every month. I never called, never wrote, never visited. The only connection between me and them became cold lines on a bank statement. Frank later found a part-time job, but I kept sending money, not because I owed them anything, but because Natalie still lived there, and I couldn't let my sister struggle. I used to think that maybe, with time, my help would show Mom that I had never turned my back, that maybe one day, she'd call just to ask how I was doing. But the only call I got from her in 3 whole years was the one telling me I couldn't come home for Christmas. I was wrong. I thought money could buy back a bit of trust, a sliver of family. But to them, I would always be the name that needed to be forgotten, in exchange for someone else's will. And that day, I decided it was time to cut it off, not just financially, but for good. I sat in my apartment for a long time after hanging up. No more anger, just emptiness. Mom had told me straight up that I wasn't welcome home for Christmas, not because I did anything wrong, but simply because Amanda's grandparents didn't like me, and Mom didn't want to risk losing their inheritance. I used to think that after all the money I quietly sent, after all those months of covering the mortgage, Mom would at least be a little grateful. That if I couldn't be the daughter in her heart, I'd at least be someone she couldn't easily cast aside. I was wrong. The next day, I opened my banking app and canceled every single auto transfer to her mortgage account. A clean decision. No warning, no message. I had nothing left to give them. Not love, not money, not the faint hope that someday they might choose me over outsiders. That evening, Natalie showed up at my place earlier than expected. She brought with her a fake Christmas tree taller than 5 feet, a bag full of string lights, candy canes, and a bunch of pre-wrapped boxes. "This Christmas, we're making our own tradition," she declared, her eyes gleaming. We turned on the music, the apartment glowing with warm yellow lights, and decorated the tree with glass ornaments one by one. Natalie talked about school, her loud friends, and the presentation she'd just finished. I laughed more that night than I had all month, and when she handed me a small silver-wrapped box, I nearly cried. "It's not much," Natalie said softly, "but it's money I saved from my part-time job. I want you to buy something just for yourself, not for anyone else." I hugged her tight. The next day, I called a few close friends, the kind who were staying in the city for the holidays, not going home. Emily, my college classmate, brought boxes of homemade gingerbread cookies. Tyler and Sam, my longtime friends from undergrad, showed up with a stash of board games and a guitar. We turned that Christmas into a real celebration, warm, lively, and genuine. At midnight, we all gathered around the table, raised our glasses of eggnog, and sang, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas." I looked around. Faces not tied to me by blood or shared pasts, but each one made me feel like I belonged. For the first time in years, I felt at home. I thought that was the end of it. I cut ties, they stayed silent, a quiet kind of closure. But then, 3 weeks later, Mom called again. I stared at her name flashing on the screen, my hand hesitating. In the end, I picked up. "Angela," she said quickly, getting straight to the point. "There's an issue with the bank payment. Did you forget to send it?" "No," I replied calmly. "I canceled it." "What?" Her voice cracked. "You can't do that. The payment's due today. We were counting on that money." "Then maybe call Amanda's grandparents," I said, voice steady but firm. "You chose them over me. Let them carry that responsibility too." "Angela, that was a moment of weakness. It was a desperate situation." "No," I cut her off. "It was a choice. And now, I get to make mine." After a few seconds of silence, Mom switched to a blaming tone. "You told Natalie not to come home, didn't you? We had to tell her grandparents she was sick. I had to make up a whole story, just because of you," I replied coldly. "So you're willing to lie about your daughter being seriously ill, as long as it means keeping the money from them? Don't judge me until you've been a mother," she yelled. I didn't respond. I simply pressed the button to end the call. From that moment, I never received another call. Natalie still visited me every week. We took walks, cooked together, laughed together. She told me Mom still mentioned me, but in a tone like I was a system error she couldn't erase. But I had made my choice. I was no longer the little girl waiting by the window for her mother. I was a woman who had learned to love herself, and who knew that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to close the door that once broke your heart and go find another way. Even if it starts with loneliness. On a late March afternoon, the sky over Seattle was thick with gray clouds, as if winter still refused to leave. I was buried in plans for the grand opening of Pine Grove's new location in the Fremont area when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it was Natalie, but when I looked through the peephole, my hand froze. Standing outside was Mom. Beside her were Frank and Natalie. I opened the door, partly out of curiosity, partly out of concern for my sister. Natalie stepped in first, her gaze gentle, but firm. "I know this is a surprise, but please, just hear them out." I stepped back and let them in. The familiar space suddenly felt stifling. Mom clutched her purse, her eyes scanning the room like she was searching for a memory that never existed. Frank stood still, hands clasped, his face pale with tension. "Angela," Mom began, her voice hoarse. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I'm asking for a chance to speak. I crossed my arms, standing across from them. Go ahead. She hesitated a moment, then continued. Christmas. I was wrong. I put money ahead of you. I betrayed the very child I was supposed to protect. I said nothing. It was still too early to trust regret, especially when it came after months of silence. Frank spoke for the first time, not avoiding my eyes. Angela, I know I treated you badly. I let my parents control everything. My views, my emotions. I stayed silent when I should have spoken up for you. That was my fault. Only realizing that now, I asked evenly, after all these years, after all the times you ignored me and turned your back like I never existed? Mom nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. Each month that the money didn't come, I wasn't upset about losing support. I was upset because I knew, for the first time, you had truly given up on me. I looked at Natalie. She stood in the center of the room waiting. You arranged this? I didn't force them, Natalie said. But I made it clear, if they wanted to hold on to anything left of this family, they had to come and face what they did. Silence settled over us. I looked at the three people, the woman who used to be my whole world, the man who never called me his daughter, and the only sister who never betrayed me, and let out a sigh. What about Amanda's grandparents? I asked. Do they still think I'm someone who needs to stay away to protect their precious will? Frank shook his head slightly. I called them. I told them I wouldn't keep pretending anymore. If that means they cut me out of the will, then so be it. I tilted my head. Sounds like a bold statement. Why now? Because of Natalie, he said. She told us if we didn't face the truth, she'd never come home again. I can't lose both my daughters. That made me pause. What did you just call me? Daughter, he replied, without hesitation. Mom stepped closer and pulled an envelope from her purse. We don't need you to send money anymore. Frank got a new job with a stable income. We're not here to ask for help. We're here to ask for you. I took the envelope. Inside were financial documents and an updated estate plan, where both Natalie and I were listed in Frank's will. For the first time in years, they were trying, really trying, not just with words. That doesn't mean I can trust you right away, I said. Wounds don't just disappear because of a few apologies. Mom nodded. I know. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove I won't repeat my mistakes. We're looking into a family therapist, Natalie added. I think we need someone to help untangle what's been buried too long. I looked into their eyes. No coldness, no pretense. None of the things I had become so used to. Just three people, carrying regret and a fragile hope for a second chance. I nodded slightly. I'm not promising forgiveness, but I can try to start again. Mom's face lit up, tears falling freely. Frank exhaled in relief, and Natalie stepped forward to hug me tightly. I stood in the middle of the room, still unsure if I'd done the right thing, but at least, for the first time in a long while, it felt like maybe I could start writing a new chapter on my own terms. Our first therapy session took place on a gloomy Thursday afternoon in the warmly lit office of Dr. Emma Wallace. She was a woman in her 50s with neatly tied gray hair and a voice both calm and sharp, enough to keep anyone from hiding their true feelings for long. I sat between Natalie and Mom with Frank across from us. No one spoke for the first few minutes. Only the ticking of the wall clock filled the awkward space. Let's begin with something simple, Dr. Wallace said. Each of you, tell me what you hope to get out of this process. Mom was the first to speak. I want my family back. I want Angela to be able to call me Mom without feeling like it's a stranger's word. I didn't react, but something shifted inside me. Frank was more hesitant. I want to understand how I let this happen and fix it if I still can. Natalie simply said, I want everyone to be honest. No more hiding things. When it was my turn, I looked down at my hands and said softly, I want to understand why I was treated like I didn't matter, and I need to know if that can ever change." The room fell silent, but this time, it was the kind of silence we needed. The sessions that followed weren't easy. Some days we talked things through. Other days I walked out with tears streaming down my face. Mom still had her reflexes, defensiveness, excuses. But Dr. Wallace didn't let it slide. "Are you explaining the pain?" she asked during one session, "or trying to justify it?" It stunned Mom into silence. Once, I recounted the time I was locked in the room after the incident with Amanda. Mom looked down in shame, and Frank bit his lip until it turned pale. "I know they were out of line," he said, eyes fixed on his hands. "But I didn't dare stand up for you. I've been controlled by my parents my whole life, and I thought if I stayed silent, everything would stay peaceful." "You thought I would be at peace being locked in a room, eating through a slot like some kind of criminal?" I asked, my voice cracking. Not out of anger, but from a disappointment that had built up for years. Frank looked up, his eyes red. "Angela, when I was your age, my parents threatened to cut off my tuition if I didn't study the major they chose. They threatened to disinherit me if I married someone they didn't approve of. They said they'd disown me if I let my wife's daughter sit at the same table. And I stayed silent through all of it. By the time I realized what I'd lost, you were already gone, too far to hear my apology." I didn't respond right away, but for the first time, I didn't see him as a distant shadow in my memory anymore. He was someone who had been controlled, just like me. We were more alike than I had ever allowed myself to believe. Outside of therapy, we started establishing small habits to rebuild. One dinner a month. Just the four of us, no one else. No talk of money, no mention of Amanda's grandparents, just everyday stories. Natalie's job at the city library, the lasagna Mom was relearning how to make, the new cafe Zoe and I had opened. There were still awkward silences and clumsy moments, but I began to notice real change. Mom stopped saying things like, "It was just a misunderstanding." She started saying, "I'm sorry," more easily, without the word "but" attached. One night after dinner, Frank handed me an envelope. I opened it and found a copy of a revised will. My name and Natalie's clearly listed, with no conditions. "This isn't to make you think we're trying to buy forgiveness," he said. "It's to show you that from now on, no one gets to use money to divide love in this family." I nodded, feeling a small weight lift off my chest. One time when it was just Mom and me in a therapy session, Dr. Wallace asked, "If there's one thing you've never said to Angela but wish you could, what is it?" Mom looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "Angela, I let you carry more than any child should have had to. I was wrong to stay silent. But what hurts me the most is knowing you had to learn to live without me. And I don't know how to earn my way back." I didn't cry, but inside me, a door, old and dusty, creaked open. We still weren't a perfect family, but at least this time, we were all walking in the same direction. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like the outsider in my own story. One afternoon in early June, with sunlight still lingering on the polished wood of my dining table, Frank invited me into his home office. The space was just as I remembered it. Thick books lined up on the shelves, a small bonsai tree near the window, and that dark brown leather chair that always smelled faintly of new paper. But this time, instead of feeling like an intruder or a guest, I stepped in with a different mindset. Part of me stayed cautious, but the rest was learning to welcome what was genuinely changing. Frank sat behind his desk, his hand resting lightly on a cream-colored envelope with my name handwritten on it. "Angela," he began, his voice deep and slow, "this is a copy of my new will. It was notarized by the lawyer this morning. I wanted you to receive it directly from me." I opened the envelope. Inside was the legal document, along with a clear asset breakdown. No fine print, no hidden strings. My name and Natalie's stood side by side, with specific notes about our shares, regardless of anything from Amanda's side of the family. I told them, "I no longer follow their conditions," Frank said, eyes still on me. They were angry, threatened to cut ties, but I told them I've been cut off from myself for far too long. It's time to fix that. I looked at him and said nothing, but inside something shifted. Not because of what was in the will. I never needed any of it. But because, for the first time, I felt seen as a real part of this family. After that, family dinners became a new tradition, not forced or awkward like before, but genuine get-togethers. We took turns hosting, sometimes at my place, sometimes at Natalie's, and sometimes in Mom's old kitchen, the one that had seen both my childhood and the times I used to avoid the gaze of Amanda's grandparents. But now, they never showed up. Mom had cut ties with them on her own. She changed her phone number and told them clearly, if they wanted to be part of their grandchildren's lives, they had to respect everyone, or no one at all. We started talking about things no one had dared mention before. The time I was locked up after Amanda's fall, how Mom used to avoid the truth, and how Natalie often felt stuck in between. There were tears, there were heavy silences, but not once did anyone deny or deflect anymore. I remember one evening, after Natalie finished talking about her work at the library, Frank suddenly said, "When my daughter got into college, I didn't say anything. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I didn't know how to show it, having never learned how to love without conditions." Mom, sitting beside him, gently took his hand. "Then let's learn together." I left the table that night with an unfamiliar feeling. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because, for once, I wasn't carrying the weight of our family alone, unseen and unheard. A week later, Natalie sent me a small card. It read, "Real Family Day, first celebration this Saturday. No pressure, no obligation. Come if you want, just bring your honest heart." I laughed when I read it. The card had a doodle on it, 4 people holding hands in front of a giant pizza. Natalie had never been good at drawing, but I still framed it and hung it on my fridge. That night, I sat alone on the balcony, watching the city light up. A year ago, I'd sat in this very spot, wiping away tears after a Christmas call that made me finally see my true place in the family. Now, I was still here, but with a different heart. This hadn't come from easy forgiveness. It came from me standing up, saying enough, and walking away to protect myself. I'd learned a powerful truth. Not everyone born under the same roof will choose to love you the right way, but if you protect your boundaries with courage, sometimes you're the one who teaches them how to love, from the beginning. And in the moment I stopped fearing losing them, was the moment they began to truly value me. The new Pine Grove branch in Fremont officially opened on a sunny Sunday afternoon, with a light breeze carrying the scent of early cherry blossoms. I stood at the front desk, adjusting my name badge, nerves fluttering, even though I was used to this by now. But something was different today. Not just because this was the 10th location Zoe and I had built together, but because for the first time, I had invited my whole family to the opening. When I turned around, I saw them walk in, Mom, Frank, and Natalie. No one wore anything flashy. No exaggerated compliments or false smiles, just genuinely warm eyes and a real hug from Natalie as she whispered, "I'm proud of you." We had dinner upstairs at the restaurant, under soft golden lights and gentle jazz playing in the background. Mom talked about her new garden, Frank shared his home renovation project, and Natalie chattered on about her recent trip to Portland with friends from the library. It wasn't perfect. Mom still occasionally slipped up and said something that made me pause mid-bite. Natalie shot her subtle glances, silent warnings. But this time, no one stormed off. No one shut down. After each misstep, there was a timely apology. After each misunderstanding, a real effort to listen. We had changed, not because of some miracle, but because of deliberate choices. Every day. Once, after a therapy session, Mom pulled me aside and handed me a soft leather journal. "I've written everything I remember in here, the things I did wrong, the things I wish I could redo, not to justify, but so you know, I'm starting over." I didn't open it right away. But I carried it with me as a reminder that some relationships don't die. They just need to be cleared out, rebuilt, and reseated. 3 months later, Natalie moved into her own apartment near downtown. I helped her pack, and then the two of us lay sprawled on the empty floor, staring up at the ceiling like kids discovering the world for the first time. "Do you think our family will stay like this?" she asked, her voice suddenly low. I turned to look at her, shook my head slightly, then smiled. "I don't know, but I believe if they keep choosing love, then yes." "Family is a choice?" Natalie tilted her head. "Yeah, it's not a given. It's something you choose every day. Choosing to stay, to forgive, to listen." Natalie stayed quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Then I'll choose too. Every day." That night, I went home alone. The breeze from Lake Washington swept through the window, carrying the chill of a summer not yet fully bloomed. I turned on the lights, walked into the kitchen, placed my bag on the counter, and paused in front of a small framed photo on the wall. In the picture, Natalie and I were grinning wide during the Fremont grand opening. Next to us stood Mom and Frank. Not perfect, but clearly trying. I'd labeled the photo simply, "Family, Revised Edition." I thought back to everything. The locked room when I was 14, the nights I lay awake hearing Mom cry softly outside my door, the silent phone on Christmas. And then I remembered Mom's trembling voice in therapy, Frank's shaky words when he first called me daughter, and the look in Natalie's eyes whenever I was on the verge of falling apart, a look that never let go. No, I haven't forgotten the past, but I refuse to let it change my future. I understand not everyone gets a chance to rebuild with their family, and not everyone should. But if one day the people who hurt you learn to stop, to say sorry without demanding immediate forgiveness, to listen instead of defend, then maybe they deserve a chance. And you deserve peace, even if it comes late. Family, in the end, isn't just where you're born. It's where you're chosen to stay. A place where people, even after being lost, come back together. Not because of blood, but because they choose to love you the way you deserve to be loved. And on that journey, I'm no longer the girl who was cast aside on Christmas night. I am Angela, a woman who has learned to stand tall, to love herself, and to bravely say, "I deserve to be loved, unconditionally." From my own story, I've learned that family isn't fixed. It's a choice, rebuilt each day with honesty and respect. Sometimes, to find your worth, you have to let go, stand up, and say enough. But if you're lucky, the ones who once hurt you might learn to change. I no longer wait for a perfect family. I only hope for people brave enough to make things right. And I've found them, right in my own family. What do you think about Angela's journey and the transformation of her family? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more heartfelt, honest stories about family and life in our upcoming episodes. I never liked the Lancaster family gatherings, but this year I had to show up. In a simple navy blue dress, I stood near the bar in the grand hall of Uncle Harold's mansion, quietly observing the booming laughter, the mutual flattery, and the self-satisfied glances, like everyone was competing for the lead role in an elite drama. The towering crystal chandeliers reflected off the mirrored walls, creating a dazzling, almost suffocating space. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with the gleam of polished walnut floors made me feel like I was standing in a museum of so-called status. They, the ones with Lancaster blood, always knew how to turn every gathering into a power display. I had just lifted my champagne glass to my lips when Aunt Margaret's voice cut through the classical music, sharp as scissors. "Victoria, goodness, I almost didn't recognize you. Still working as a secretary at, what was it again? Apex Consulting?" I smiled, keeping my gaze calm while my heart beat steadily. "Executive assistant, Auntie, and yes, still at Apex." She raised an eyebrow, a familiar move whenever she was about to pass judgment. "Well, haven't moved to a real company yet? You should consider it, you know. You could be doing so much more, if you used your time wisely." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was far too used to comments like that. In their eyes, women in this family either married powerful men or worked in support roles, always supporting men. You know, another voice chimed in, smug. It was Alex, my cousin, recently appointed deputy executive director at his father's firm just 2 months ago. If you ever want a real job, I can talk to Dad. Our legal department is looking for someone to draft contracts. I hid a smile by taking another sip. If Alex knew I had just approved a $38 million restructuring contract last week, he probably wouldn't have said that. Thanks, but I'm happy with my current job. Alex scoffed. Well, good. Just remember, stability doesn't mean success. That line, no doubt memorized from some leadership seminar for newly promoted execs. I said nothing. I just recalled a recent email from my company's communications department, reminding me to prep for an interview with Forbes Business Weekly. My eyes wandered around the room, where my relatives proudly discussed construction contracts, financial projects, investment strategies. Most were men, all in navy suits and expensive watches. The few women present were mostly wives or girlfriends, dressed to impress, but no one mentioned their careers. The Lancasters never hid their favoritism toward men. It was practically embedded in their bloodline. Women in this family were only praised when they were in the background. A wife with social grace, a daughter with a clean image, a dependable secretary. Nothing more. I once tried to prove I could be more. But the year I graduated with an MBA from Wharton with honors, all I got from them was a bouquet. No card, no celebratory dinner. When I pitched a proposal to transform small businesses through agile consulting models at a family gathering 7 years ago, they laughed. Consulting? Uncle Harold had said, loud enough for the maid carrying drinks to pause. Victoria, let the big firms handle that stuff. You should be thinking about settling down. That night, I left Uncle Harold's mansion with one goal. I would build my own empire. Quietly. And one day, they would have to listen. I chose the name Apex Solutions because it evoked the summit, the place I was headed. It started with just me and an old laptop, working from a rented office above a shoe repair shop in Milwaukee. But I had something they didn't. A clear vision, a sharp strategy, and a restructuring approach major firms hadn't dared to try. 7 years later, Apex has become a known name in corporate restructuring. But to the Lancasters, I'm still just Secretary Victoria. I looked at the glass in my hand, the light catching the thick rim like all the times I'd been underestimated. I finished my drink, set the glass down, and smiled. They never knew that the secretary they looked down on had blocked more than a few massive acquisition deals they thought were already theirs. And tonight, as they eagerly shared stories about new contracts, I waited for just one moment. The moment someone casually mentioned the name Apex. When that happened, I wouldn't need to say a word. All I'd do is smile and let the truth slowly unfold. I still remember that winter night clearly. The night every bit of belief I had in family finally crumbled. I was only 26 then, just under a year out of my MBA program. Fueled by the passion of youth, I believed that if I presented my ideas clearly enough, I could convince them, the heads of the Lancaster clan, that my proposal wasn't just feasible, it had the potential to reshape the future of small business consulting. I had prepared meticulously. Presentation slides, market reports, business models, a 3-year strategy. Everything neatly stored on the black USB drive I'd kept since college. I stood in Uncle Harold's meeting room, where the polished mahogany reflected the warm yellow lights, and began my pitch. For the first 10 minutes, they maintained polite expressions. 10 minutes later, a faint chuckle escaped from Uncle Raymond, who managed the family's real estate investment chain. By the 30th minute, Uncle Harold couldn't hold back anymore. Victoria, you're a smart girl, but you've got your head in the clouds. Small business restructuring consulting? Who's going to believe in you? What experience do you have? You've never run a company. That's why I'm starting with small businesses. I have a plan to grow steadily, forming strategic partnerships with... Enough. His voice was cold. If you really want to work, come to my office next week. I'll get you a spot in the records room. Start with the basics. The room fell silent, except for the soft laugh from my cousin Marcus, who had filed for bankruptcy 3 times in 4 years, but was still seen as promising. That night, I left the mansion with one decision. I would do it on my own, without a single one of them. I started with the small amount I'd saved from years of part-time work and postgraduate scholarships. A tiny room on the 3rd floor of an old building in Edgewater, Chicago, right above a phone repair shop, became the first headquarters of Orion Strategies, the name I chose instead of Apex because I wanted it to evoke long-term vision and clarity, like constellations in the sky. At first, there was no sign, no receptionist, no polished office, just me, an old desk, and an unshakable belief that I was doing the right thing. I handwrote every business plan for my first client, a print shop drowning in debt and operating costs. They came to me because they had no other options. I spent nearly 2 months living in their balance sheets, accompanying them to every bank meeting, renegotiating every supply contract. When their revenue rose 19% in a single quarter, the name Orion Strategies began to circulate in local business circles, like a rumor no one could confirm. I knew if I wanted to go further, I had to stay hidden. I hired an old friend, a corporate law expert, to act as my legal representative. I signed all documents as an independent advisor. I declined every interview. When clients came in, I was the project assistant. When they left, I was the one coordinating every strategy. Every employee I hired, from analysts to accountants, signed a confidentiality agreement. They didn't know I was the founder. They only knew me as Victoria, the one who keeps everything running smoothly. 3 years later, Orion had 4 small branches in Chicago, Minneapolis, Austin, and Denver. Though no one knew my name, I had successfully negotiated contracts with 3 retail chains and a tech company on the brink of collapse. I kept myself out of every photo, every press conference, every industry event. Not because I feared being exposed, but because I wanted to steer every step myself. No spotlight distracted me. No handshake threw me off course. I vividly remember one night, walking past the office after a late meeting. The glass door still glowed faintly with the blue light from the projector, a few documents scattered on the conference table. I paused to look through the glass and saw my reflection, not the woman in a plain dress, silent at a Lancaster family gathering, but someone slowly gaining real power. The power of knowledge, perseverance, and strategy. No one in my family knew. To them, I was still Victoria, the unmarried niece working as an assistant at some company they'd never heard of. But I was quietly building an empire, solid, steady, and increasingly impossible to overlook. And I knew the time for them to see who I really was would come. 6 years after I opened that first tiny office, Orion Strategies had become a name that couldn't be dismissed in the corporate restructuring field. But the point wasn't the reputation, it was the way we operated. Quietly, strategically, and most importantly, anonymously. When the stock market started to fluctuate, when family businesses began to crumble from supply chain disruptions, and when major corporations smelled opportunity for acquisitions, that was when Orion became the name many business owners called, as a last chance. We didn't launch loud campaigns, no PR blitz, no CEO talk shows, no magazine cover interviews. Everything started through discreet referrals among executives. There's a group of experts who never go public, but if they take your case, your company might survive. That discretion helped us stay off the radar of speculators, especially those at Lancaster Holdings. I discovered a truth that was both bitter and, in a way, fitting. The very company run by Uncle Raymond, the one who once scoffed at my business proposal, was leading the charge in acquiring struggling family-owned businesses. They didn't restructure. They split, sell cheap, and erase the trail. And so I began to shift my focus. I hired a market research team specialized in tracking cold acquisitions across the U.S., Sudden approaches, lowball buyout offers, contracts that left no trace in the press. Among the names that surfaced, several companies were on the verge of being swallowed by Lancaster Holdings. I didn't tell anyone. No need. I simply began reaching out to those businesses before my family could make their move. A shipyard in Portland, an electronic components manufacturer in Ohio, an organic cosmetics brand in New Mexico. They were all small businesses, full of potential but lacking strategy and capital. And they were all ready to sell, thinking there was no way out. But when they received an email from an unfamiliar address, with a message saying, "Let us review your books before you sign any deal," at least half of them agreed to a meeting. And after that meeting, most of them chose Orion. We didn't just save them from collapse. We gave them a 90-day action plan. Restructuring operations, renegotiating supplier contracts, reorganizing cash flow, and, most importantly, building a sustainable roadmap for at least the next 2 years. All executed by top-tier experts, carefully selected and following the exact strategy I had laid out. With every successful case, Orion not only earned a generous consulting fee, but also quietly shut down a takeover plan from none other than my own family. The one I remember most was the deal in Seattle. A medical equipment manufacturer called Caldwell Instruments was under pressure from Lancaster Holdings. I flew out there and personally attended the meeting. Still under the title of strategic assistant, I quietly took notes, observed, and organized documents in front of the CEO. No one knew that every major decision was being made by me, step by step, through gentle suggestions from senior advisors I had trained. When I walked out of that meeting room, the Seattle sky had opened up with rain. I stood under the awning, looking toward the high-rises glowing with city lights. I knew that somewhere, in a fancy office in Manhattan, Uncle Raymond was fuming after realizing his prized deal had just been stolen by an invisible rival. But they still didn't know it was me. To the staff, I was still just Victoria from internal analysis. I never signed my real name on any documents. Every email I sent came from a shared account. Even the original founders had no idea who was leading the company. I didn't need the spotlight. All I needed was to know that with each step, each small business we saved, I was reclaiming what they had once refused to give me. 10 years passed, and Orion Strategies had opened offices in 11 cities, managing a restructuring portfolio of over 80 businesses. But no one, not even my own family, could link my name to the empire they had grown to fear, but couldn't touch. I used to think secrecy was a form of protection. Now I understand it was strategy. A perfect strategy. And when my family realized there was an unseen force blocking their every move, it might already be too late to turn back. The call came at 8 p.m. on Wednesday. I was reviewing the Southern Region expansion plan when Maya, my direct assistant, walked in, holding the internal phone. Her eyes lit with something she had just discovered. "Victoria, Crestmont Industries just sent an urgent message. Looks like Lancaster Holdings is trying to pressure them into accepting a merger deal within 72 hours. And as far as I know, they reached out to Orion 2 weeks ago." I looked up and gave a small nod. I had expected this. Crestmont was one of the few remaining family-owned businesses in Missouri, specializing in advanced agricultural equipment. They were in the middle of a financial restructuring, and as usual, Lancaster Holdings had sensed weakness. Uncle Raymond and his strategic investment team were preparing to make their final move. I stood and walked over to the large glass board in my office, where our targeted deals were being closely tracked. In the upper left corner, the name Crestmont was marked in orange. I reached for a marker and circled it. "Tell them I'll attend the meeting personally. Have them schedule it for Saturday morning at the Chicago headquarters." Maya hesitated. "You're going to reveal yourself?" I nodded. "It's time." Saturday morning, I stepped into the large conference room on the 21st floor of the Orion Strategies building. the headquarters that the Lancaster family still believed belonged to a mid-tier consulting firm, not worth their attention. They had walked past this place many times during investment summits, even once sat in this very room. Without realizing I had been there too, playing the role of logistics coordinator. Today was different. I chose a slate gray suit, sharply tailored, paired with a high-collared white shirt. Nothing flashy, but just enough to establish presence. Maya had already prepared the files, documents, and a detailed breakdown of the merger terms. All I had to do was walk in and deliver the final move. At 8:45 a.m., the delegation from Lancaster Holdings arrived. Leading the group was Uncle Raymond, wearing his usual confident demeanor, one hand in his suit pocket, a deep red tie standing out against a charcoal gray suit. Beside him were Alex, my cousin, now serving as a senior legal advisor, and Claire, another cousin who had once refused to partner with me when I proposed investing in her logistics startup 3 years ago. They didn't recognize me right away. To them, I was still the slightly stubborn niece of the Lancaster family, working somewhere they couldn't be bothered to remember. That changed the moment I pulled out the chair at the center of the conference table, the seat reserved for Orion Strategies' highest-ranking representative. The room shifted. "Good morning. I'm Victoria Lancaster, founder and CEO of Orion Strategies," I said evenly, "and I'll be leading today's meeting." Claire dropped her pen. Alex stared at me as if he were seeing a completely different person. Uncle Raymond, stunned for a split second, squinted at me. "What is this? You're the CEO of Orion? That's impossible." "Maybe because you've never really looked at me. Just like you've never really looked at any of the women in this family. Unless they were pouring drinks or entertaining guests." Maya stepped in, quietly placing folders on the table, distributing them to each person. I looked each of them in the eye, slowly, deliberately. "The documents in front of you outline Orion's proposed merger terms for Crestmont Industries, if you wish to continue negotiations. If not, starting Monday, we'll proceed with acquiring 35% of Crestmont's shares, which are currently being privately offered. Backed by an international investment fund, the deal will close in 10 days. Alex cleared his throat, trying to regain composure. "This isn't legitimate. You can't just show up and change the rules like this." "I'm not changing the rules," I cut in. "I'm just the only one here who knows the whole board." Uncle Raymond looked at me with a complicated expression. "You've hidden this from us for 10 years. You're betraying your family." I let out a laugh, but there wasn't a hint of humor in it. Betrayal? What family, exactly? The one that laughed at me during a meeting when I talked about starting my own business? Or the one that only mentions my name as an example of a girl who hasn't made it? I stood up, my hand resting lightly on the folder in front of me. "I used your dismissal as a shield, and with it I built a company that doesn't just survive. It's redefining how businesses are saved. Not to be sold off, but to be revived." I paused, my gaze locked on Uncle Raymond. "Crestmont is your last chance to collaborate with respect. If the family chooses to continue its path of acquisition, then I'll see you on the stock exchange." And with a slight nod, I stepped out of the meeting room, leaving behind stunned faces, an echo of silence, and the quiet shift of a storm changing direction. I didn't go back in right away. Instead, I stood by the glass hallway on the 21st floor, looking down at the bustling street below. The March wind cut through my thick coat, but I didn't feel cold. I felt clearer than ever. The look in Uncle Raymond's eyes earlier, confusion, yes, but also a hint of fear. Maya stepped beside me, holding a tablet. Claire's reviewing the contract again, Alex is on the phone with legal, and Uncle Raymond? He's wondering how the niece he once called invisible just managed to put the entire family on the defensive. I smiled faintly, still watching the city. I decided to return. This game wasn't over yet. When I pushed open the door, the mood had shifted. Claire was no longer sitting upright. Alex had loosened his tie and was flipping through the documents tensely. Uncle Raymond sat with arms crossed, stone-faced, but his eyes were darting, searching for an exit. I pulled out my chair and sat down slowly, deliberately. I assume you're trying to find a way to regain control, I said calmly, as if beginning a routine internal meeting. Allow me to save you some time. I snapped my fingers. Maya handed me another folder. I pulled out 3 documents and placed one in front of each person. These are records of the deals Lancaster Holdings pursued over the past 3 years, but that ultimately fell through with no clear reason. Alex frowned, studying me. Claire began flipping through the papers. Uncle Raymond didn't move. It seemed he already knew what was coming. I listed them one by one. Plymouth Textiles. Deal fell apart at the last minute after a consulting firm proposed a full restructuring plan that increased the company's valuation by 23%. Noblecraft, a furniture company in Texas, advised to shift their distribution model, and within 6 months, their stock value nearly doubled, far surpassing the original acquisition offer. Anderson Robotics, a startup in Denver. They were ready to sell for $14 million, but after one anonymous strategic consulting session, they secured a $60 million manufacturing contract. I paused, curling a slight smile. They all have one thing in common. Each was approached, analyzed, and restructured by Orion Strategies, which means by me. Alex dropped his pen. Claire closed her eyes for a brief second. Uncle Raymond kept staring at me. You sabotaged a series of our deals, he said slowly. No, I corrected him. I saved the companies you were trying to erase. Claire whispered, barely audible. You've been there, this whole time. In the shadows. I nodded. Exactly. And the most interesting part is, none of you ever noticed. Why? Because I don't dress like an executive? Because I don't show up in magazines? Or because you never believed a young woman in this family could be someone who matters? Uncle Raymond gripped the armrest of his chair tightly. If you think you can force us to accept these terms— No, I interrupted, locking eyes with him. I'm not forcing you. I'm offering a choice. I slid the merger agreement closer. You can sign here, preserve your dignity and a portion of the financial gain, or refuse, and I'll proceed to acquire the remaining shares freely on the open market. At that point, Orion will hold full control over Crestmont. No more negotiation. No one said a word for several seconds. Then Claire spoke, softly. If we decline, they'll do exactly what she said. I've reviewed their cash flow. They have the resources to acquire controlling shares in less than 2 weeks. Alex exhaled, picking up his pen. I think we should accept. Uncle Raymond suddenly stood up. I need a minute. He left the room, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the water glasses. Maya leaned toward me and whispered, Do you want to pause the meeting? I shook my head. No. They need time to realize the world has changed. And I'm not little Victoria anymore. 15 minutes later, Uncle Raymond returned, his face no longer cold and sharp. There was something different in his eyes, something more tired. He didn't say a word, just pulled out his chair, sat down, picked up the pen, and signed. I didn't say anything more, just nodded respectfully, stood up, picked up the folder, and walked out of the room. Outside, the sun had broken through after the night's rain. Light poured through the tall glass windows, reflecting off the polished stone floor. I had played my move perfectly. And for the first time, the Lancaster family was the one to retreat. 3 weeks after the signing at Orion headquarters, Monday's financial news lit up with headlines. Crestmont Industries officially merged with Orion Strategies under a sustainable growth partnership model. The market responded quickly. Orion stock rose 17% in 48 hours. Lancaster Holdings? It plummeted. I sat in my office, watching the news ticker on the big screen. In the lower corner, my name appeared for the first time on national TV. Victoria Lancaster, the mysterious CEO behind this year's biggest business turnarounds. I turned off the TV. Success was never the destination. For me, this was only the beginning of a much bigger transformation. The special shareholders meeting of Lancaster Holdings was scheduled the following week. For the first time in the company's history, a woman, me, was nominated for a seat on the board of directors. Not because they wanted to, but because Orion's stake had surpassed 31%. I walked into the meeting wearing an ivory suit, the boardroom lights catching the glass wall behind me, forming a soft halo as if the entire room had converged its gaze on one center. And it had. The faces of the aging board members, mostly men, showed unease they couldn't hide. A few forced polite smiles, others avoided eye contact, but one person didn't show up. Alex, the cousin who once smugly claimed he could get me a real job, had just been asked to step down temporarily from his legal advisor role due to conflicts of interest uncovered in multiple deals. I didn't feel triumphant, I just felt right. When invited to speak, I stepped up to the podium, placed my hand on the table, and looked straight into the camera, live streaming to thousands of shareholders. We will no longer operate by outdated thinking, buy low, sell high, strip down, and walk away. Starting today, Lancaster Holdings will become a platform for investment, renewal, and restoration. We won't just acquire companies, we will help them stand on their own, and I'm here to make sure of that. I stepped down to a smattering of applause that gradually swelled into a full round. Slightly awkward, but undeniable. The balance of power was shifting. Claire, my cousin, who once deeply doubted me, sent an apology email. It wasn't long, just, "You were right, and you did what no one thought possible. I hope one day I can learn from you." I read it, saved it to my to remember folder, and didn't respond. Uncle Raymond, on the other hand, remained completely silent. I knew it wouldn't be easy for him to accept defeat, especially when it came at the hands of someone he once saw as a shadow on the sidelines. But the last time we ran into each other at an industry event, he simply nodded at me. No criticism, no condescension, just a nod. Perhaps that was the biggest acknowledgement he could give me. As for Patricia, the ever-composed aunt, she began a campaign to rebuild her image. She appeared on a podcast for accomplished women, her voice sweet. I always believed Victoria had potential. Our family is very proud of her. Unfortunately, the internet doesn't forgive easily. Within an hour of the podcast airing, an old video from the previous year resurfaced, at a family birthday party, where Patricia plainly told me in front of everyone, "Victoria, stop dreaming. You don't have the Lancaster business gene. That's for the men." The clip went viral. The hashtag, "This is the real Patricia," trended overnight. Aunt Patricia had to pause all media appearances, delete her personal social media accounts, and avoid the press. 2 months later, James, the youngest cousin, asked to meet me at a cafe in Lincoln Park. He brought a pitch for a joint venture, an investment arm under Orion, focused on female-founded startups. It sounded noble, but I saw the ambition in his eyes. James never did anything that didn't benefit himself. I sipped my coffee, looked him in the eye. "James, Orion wasn't built to monopolize. We built it to share value. But only with those who truly believe in that. You're not ready." I stood, left the check along with my short refusal, and walked out. Behind me, James sat in silence, his usual confidence gone for the first time. I didn't need to defeat them. They lost their footing all on their own, through arrogance and bias. Justice doesn't always arrive with a gavel. Sometimes it comes when the people who once dismissed you are forced to listen. And in my case, to learn, silence. 3 months after that historic shareholder meeting, my life entered a completely new phase. No more hiding behind anonymity, no more pretending to be an admin or silent observer in boardrooms. I, Victoria Lancaster, was now not only recognized as the force behind Orion strategies, but also a symbol for the women once overlooked, once dismissed for not fitting the mold. Interview requests, partnership offers, panel invitations, they came flooding in like a wave. But I didn't accept them all. I chose carefully. Because I knew I didn't need to be a public figure. I needed to be real. A voice for dreams that had once been silenced, then quietly reignited. The Business Innovation Award ceremony in Washington, D.C. was one of the few events I agreed to attend. It was an early summer evening, the sky cloudless, the lights from the grand hall sparkling against glass like a dream made real. I stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause, plaque in hand for Strategic Business Innovator of the Year 2025. Before hundreds of watching faces, I took a deep breath and spoke. Exactly 10 years ago, I was laughed at by the very people I called family when I spoke about starting a consulting firm. They said I was dreaming, said I should start in the archives, said I should think about marriage, not business. And I did follow their advice, but in my own way. I paused as light laughter echoed from the crowd. I built from a small office above a phone repair shop. I quietly observed, learned, and step by step, created what you now call success. But to me, success isn't in numbers or awards. It's when a college senior messages me, "I didn't think I could, until I found out you did." It's when a former admin walks into a boardroom. As a leader, the room went silent. Then, the applause erupted, long and unrelenting. After the event, I was invited to speak at over a dozen universities and women-led startup organizations. I shared my story. Not to brag, but to be honest. I spoke about the moments I wanted to give up, the nights alone surrounded by reports, the times I turned down opportunities because I wasn't ready to step into the light. And in return, I saw their eyes light up, something I once thought I'd never get to pass on. A month later, I received a pale brown envelope. No return address, just a handwritten line. "Victoria, for your eyes only." Inside was Uncle Raymond's resignation letter. It was brief, just one page. But every sentence made me pause. Victoria. I once believed I knew everything. I believed business was about power, speed, and control. But you've shown me another way. Smarter, more human. I'm stepping down from the Lancaster Holdings board. It's time for people like you to lead the next generation. I misjudged you, and I'm sorry. I folded the letter and sat quietly in my office, hand wrapped around my coffee mug, not from overwhelming emotion, but because I knew real change had begun, not just in me, but within the very system that once boxed me in. I didn't keep the letter as a trophy. I tucked it into the first page of Orion's New Generation Strategy Journal. As a reminder, sometimes justice doesn't come through thunderous judgment, but in a humble handwritten note, arriving right on time, from the person you thought would never change. A few weeks later, I hosted the first meeting of the Next Foundation, a venture fund supporting women-led businesses across the Midwest. Sitting beside me were former assistants, teachers, nurses, single mothers, and women who once never imagined leading. Now, they were pioneers. I looked at them, then back at my own journey. And I knew my true legacy isn't the company I built. It's the freedom I leave for those who come next. The freedom to dream, to begin again, and to believe. No one has the right to say they can't. I was once the most underestimated woman in my own family, deemed not enough simply because I chose a different path. But that very dismissal became the fuel for quietly building an empire from nothing. Now, I have nothing left to prove. I share this story only to remind you, sometimes power doesn't come from being given a chance, but from creating one even when no one believes you can. What do you think about Victoria's journey and how she overcame her family's judgment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful real-life stories about family and resilience. My name is Stephanie. I'm 35 years old and a single mom to an 8-year-old girl named Lily. We live in a small 2-bedroom house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. My life revolves around the little bakery, Sweet Haven, that I opened 4 years ago after my marriage fell apart. I used to think I'd be fine divorcing Kyle, my ex-husband. He was the kind of man who made promises he never kept. After the trial, he moved to Nevada with his new wife and only sent a few short texts to Lily on her birthday or Thanksgiving. Still, I don't hold it against him anymore. I don't have time to dwell on people who choose to leave. I have to live, to work, and to be my daughter's safe place. Lily is the only light in my life. She has the same warm brown eyes as me, but her soft golden curls come from her father. Every morning, I wake her up with a kiss on the forehead and a whispered greeting. Time to wake up, Mommy's little princess. And this morning was no different. I had just set out a fresh tray of pastries when Lily was already seated neatly in the corner of the shop, coloring imaginary cupcakes with her markers. Everything seemed fine until my mother, Eleanor, called again. Her voice always carried a chill, as if nothing I ever did was good enough. Stephanie, are you still busy with those cakes? She began the call like that. No greeting, no concern. I exhaled quietly. I'm working on an order for Lincoln High's anniversary. It's a big one. You always wait until the last minute. Don't let things get messy. Then she paused. Can you drop Lily off at my place tomorrow? Olivia has a meeting, and I'll be free all day. I glanced at the calendar hanging in the shop. Tomorrow was the day I had to deliver 120 mini cakes for a wedding. Dropping Lily at her grandmother's house was the only option, even if it didn't sit well with me. Okay, I'll bring her by at 9. After I hung up, I looked toward Lily. Lately, whenever I mentioned her grandmother or Aunt Olivia's house, she'd lower her eyes and go quiet. I had started to notice. Olivia is my older sister, the one Mom always held up as the perfect example. She went to a prestigious college, married into a proper family, and then got divorced after discovering her husband was unfaithful. She moved back into our mother's large house with her 11-year-old son, Benjamin. Benjamin is a difficult child. To adults, he seems smart and lively, but Lily sees things differently. Every time I pick her up from Mom's, she's quieter, less smiley, and clings to me more than usual. When I ask, she just says softly, "It's okay, Mommy," but her eyes look like they're hiding something. That night, I made a simple dinner. Creamy spaghetti, Lily's favorite. As I set the plate on the table, she looked up and asked, "Mommy, do I have to go tomorrow?" I sat down, gently touching her hand. "I have to make a delivery all morning. I can't bring you this time, but I promise I'll pick you up early, okay?" Lily nodded slightly, then returned to her coloring. She didn't say another word. After putting her to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen. Outside the window, a full moon hung over the quiet Portland sky. I closed my eyes, hoping tomorrow would pass gently. But inside, a quiet unease stirred, like something was waiting to break. I didn't know what was coming, but I had a feeling this time. It would change everything. The next morning, it was drizzling. Raindrops tapped gently on the car window, matching the heaviness in my chest. Lily sat in the back seat, hugging the pink stuffed bunny I'd sewn for her 7th birthday. She didn't say a word the whole ride. Normally, she'd ask about the bakery order or tell me stories about her classmates, but today, just silence. I pulled up in front of my mother's big gray house. The steps were clean, the bushes neatly trimmed as always, but no matter how tidy, this place always gave me chills. There was something rigid about those white painted walls. A suffocating kind of order, not meant for gentle children. "Sweetheart, I'll be back to get you at 2, I promise." I turned and smiled. Lily gave a small nod. No smile in return, no hug. Just a look that squeezed my heart. My mother, Eleanor, opened the door before I could even ring the bell. She wore a beige coat, hair neatly pinned back. "Right on time," she said, expressionless. I meant to reply, but all I said was, "Thanks for helping." Inside, I saw Olivia sitting on the couch with her laptop. She glanced at me, then looked back at the screen. Benjamin was at the end of the hallway, playing something on a tablet. He didn't bother looking up at Lily. "Bye, Mommy," Lily whispered, then stepped into the house, still clutching her stuffed bunny. I returned to the car, uneasy. Something felt wrong, like my daughter was walking into a place she didn't want to belong to. But I had to work. I had to finish the wedding order or risk losing my biggest client of the month. All morning, I rushed between the oven and the decorating counter. But my mind kept circling back to the look in Lily's eyes as she stepped out of the car. I'd seen that look before, 2 weeks ago, when I picked her up from Mom's. She moved slowly, didn't run to hug me like usual, just stood at the door and nodded when I asked if she'd had fun. I thought she was just tired. It was fear. At exactly 2 o'clock, I was back at my mother's house. I hurried to the door and knocked 3 short times. My mother opened it with a polite smile. "You're a few minutes early." "I promised I'd be here," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Where's Lily?" "Probably in the room playing with Benjamin." I quickly stepped inside. Olivia was still there, didn't even glance up. I headed straight upstairs. The guest room, where Lily usually played, was silent. I pushed the door. No one inside. My heart started pounding. I went to Benjamin's room. The door was slightly ajar. When I opened it, Lily was curled up in the corner of the bed, holding her bunny, eyes red. Benjamin was playing a game, headphones on, not noticing me. "Lily?" I walked over. She looked up but said nothing, just buried her face in my shirt when I knelt to hug her. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Did something happen?" I whispered. She shook her head, but her fingers clutched my sleeve like she'd fall apart if she let go. I turned to Benjamin. "Did something happen?" He took off one side of his headphones, looked at me casually. "I didn't do anything, just playing my game." I didn't answer. I knew that evasive look too well. Back downstairs, I said goodbye to Mom and Olivia mechanically. Mom was indifferent. Olivia didn't say a word. I walked out quickly, buckled Lily into the back seat. In the rearview mirror, I saw her staring out the window, lips pressed tight, still hugging the bunny. That helpless feeling rose in me like a crashing wave. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "if something's bothering you, you can always talk to me. I'm here to listen, okay?" Lily didn't respond. She just nodded slightly, eyes distant. That night, after she'd fallen asleep, I stood at her door for a long time. Something had changed. My daughter, the child who used to sing happily while baking with me, was now silent. And I knew I couldn't keep ignoring it. Something was happening in my mother's house. Something Lily couldn't say. Or didn't dare to. I leaned against the wall, heart heavy. I didn't know what the truth was yet, but I knew I was about to go all the way to find it. And this time, I wouldn't let my daughter face it alone. Wednesday afternoon, the sun was gentle and a cool breeze rustled through the bright red maple trees in the park near our house. I had just locked up the bakery when the phone rang. It was my mother. "Stephanie, can you come pick Lily up early?" Eleanor's voice came through, calm as always. She said she had a headache and went to lie down. "I think it's the sun." My heart raced. Lily rarely complained about feeling sick, and if she did, she always called me first. "I'll be right there." I grabbed my coat and rushed to the car. When I arrived, the door was slightly open. I stepped inside, but didn't see Mom or Olivia anywhere. The house was eerily quiet. I called out, "Lily?" No response. I ran upstairs. The guest room door was ajar. When I pushed it open, the sight before me made my blood run cold. Lily was lying on the bed, facing the wall. Her hair was messy, and a section was stuck to her head with dried blood. Her white t-shirt had several dark red stains. Her arms clutched the stuffed bunny to her chest, and her whole body trembled. "Lily?" I rushed over and held her. "Oh my God, what happened?" She slowly turned her head, her face contorted in pain. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her lips quivering. "I slipped on the stairs," Lily whispered, eyes avoiding mine. I didn't believe it. A fall down the stairs couldn't have caused that kind of injury. That much blood? It didn't add up. I carried her downstairs. My mother was sitting on the sofa with a cup of tea in hand, and Olivia stood nearby, expressionless. "Did you know what happened?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "Kids fall sometimes," my mother answered curtly. She cried for a bit and said she wanted to rest. She fell and got blood in her hair like that? Why didn't you call a doctor? Or at least call me earlier? You always overreact, Olivia cut in. She's fine. Benjamin said she tripped while running in the hallway. I froze. Benjamin. Again? I didn't say another word. I just held Lily tightly and walked straight to the car. Once we were safe inside, I gently dabbed the blood on her head with tissues. Lily whimpered, tears welling up again. Sweetheart, I'm taking you to the hospital right now. I'm here, don't be scared. On the way to the emergency room at Portland Children's Hospital, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. Lily was silent, still hugging her bunny. Her eyes stared off into the distance, missing the brightness they used to have. The hospital wasn't too crowded. A nurse quickly led us to an exam room. A few minutes later, a middle-aged woman entered, introducing herself as Dr. Lisa Morgan. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were sharp. You're Lily, right? I'm going to check you out, okay? She carefully examined the wound on Lily's head, then looked over her arms and legs. When I told her Lily said she fell down the stairs, Dr. Morgan didn't react right away, but I noticed the pensive look in her eyes. After stitching the cut and confirming there was no sign of serious internal injury, Dr. Morgan asked to speak with me privately. I'd like to talk to you for a moment, Stephanie. I sat across from her in the consultation room, my heart pounding. Ms. Stephanie, she began, calm but clear, I need to share some medical observations. Lily's head injury doesn't appear to be the result of a simple fall. The angle and depth suggest blunt force trauma, possibly from hitting the edge of a table or a wall. My throat tightened. Are you saying someone... She nodded slowly. I also found some older, faded bruises on Lily's arms and shoulders. Combined with her fearful reaction to physical contact, I suspect there may be harmful factors in her environment. I clenched my hands together. Lily told me she slipped, but I can feel she's hiding something. Dr. Morgan looked at me seriously. In cases like this, children often don't speak up out of fear, or because someone told them not to. I recommend you keep Lily away from any environment that could be harmful. We'll also file a preliminary report with Child Protective Services, as required. I nodded. Thank you, Doctor. I won't let this happen again. When I returned to the room, Lily was drawing a small picture with the nurse. She saw me, stood up, and ran over to hug me tightly. I knelt down, resting my cheek on her soft hair. Even though I didn't know exactly what was going on, I felt one thing clearly. My daughter had been enduring this alone for too long. I whispered, I'm here now, Lily. Things will be different, I promise. I sat in the consultation room, hands still shaking after talking with Dr. Morgan. Everything she said felt like tiny needles piercing my heart, quietly painful but undeniable. Lily hadn't just been hurt once. She carried signs of long-term harm. And I, her mother, hadn't seen it sooner. I'd like to keep Lily overnight, Dr. Morgan said, interrupting my thoughts. We need to observe her further and schedule a visit with the child psychologist tomorrow morning. I nodded without hesitation. I'll stay with her. That night, I sat by Lily's bedside in the quiet pediatric ward. The soft hallway light spilled in through the small window on the door. Lily was asleep, still holding her bunny like a shield. Her face looked peaceful, but the traces of pain remained. I looked at her, heart heavy like stone. I had been warned, through small changes in her behavior, but I kept brushing it off, thinking she was just adjusting to a new environment. But now, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. The next morning, a child psychologist named Dr. Rachel Bennett came to see Lily. She had a gentle smile and a warm, calming voice. Would you like to draw something with me, Lily? She asked, carrying a box of colored pencils and paper. Lily nodded softly and sat at the small table by the window. I was asked to step out while they worked. The wait felt agonizingly slow, like a rusted clock hand. I wanted to burst in, hold Lily and ask everything, but I knew pushing her would only make things worse. About 40 minutes later, Dr. Bennett came out, holding Lily's drawing. A house, a sun, a little girl standing alone, and next to her, a boy with an angry face, his eyes shaded in dark black. I can't draw any firm conclusions yet, but Lily clearly shows anxiety when it comes to her cousin. Benjamin, she said gently but seriously. She depicted him as a frightening figure, consistently using dark colors to describe her interactions with him. I swallowed hard, a chill running through me. Did she say anything about what happened? Lily isn't ready to talk openly yet, but she kept repeating, "I'm not allowed to tell." When I asked who said that, she just shook her head and changed the subject. I buried my face in my hands, a wave of sorrow and anger crashing over me. I understood immediately. Someone had made Lily believe that telling the truth would bring worse consequences. "Ms. Stephanie," Dr. Bennett continued, "in situations like this, children often feel isolated. The most important thing now is to create a sense of absolute safety for Lily. She needs time and the assurance that no one can hurt her as long as you're by her side." I nodded, eyes stinging. "I won't let her go back to that house, no matter what happens. I'll protect Lily. We'll be filing an official report with Child Protective Services," she said. "As for you, I recommend keeping interactions with the other party to a minimum, especially until it's clear who's directly responsible." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep in my arms, I opened my phone and reread the old messages from my mother and Olivia. Every word felt like a dull blade, cold, indifferent, and always turning the blame back on me whenever I asked questions. Conversations I once brushed off as normal now revealed themselves as polished layers of toxic silence. I knew this, saying, "I'll protect my child," wasn't enough. I needed evidence. I needed the truth. And if I had to go up against my entire family to win back Lily's safety, I wouldn't hesitate. I looked down at her sleeping face. Her breathing was steady, her cheeks rosy after a long day. I leaned in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You are the most precious thing in the world to me, and I won't let anyone hurt you ever again." In that moment, there was only one thing left in my heart. I had to uncover everything. Even if the whole world turned its back on me, I wouldn't back down. Because I'm Lily's mother, and because she deserves to live in love, not fear. I left the hospital with Lily in the late afternoon the next day. She remained quiet, still weary from a sleepless night and the talk with the psychologist. On the drive home, Lily asked just one question. "Mom, I don't have to go back to Grandma's house, right?" I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, looked at her through the rearview mirror, and answered, voice trembling, "No, sweetheart, I promised." But inside, I was torn. I knew that without solid proof, anything I said could be easily dismissed by my mother and Olivia. As a former lawyer, my mother had the experience to twist everything into a misunderstanding, and Olivia had always played the role of the perfect daughter in her eyes. If I cut off contact without clear justification, they'd put all the blame on me. And worse, they might try to get to Lily behind my back. That evening, after Lily was sound asleep, I called Maya, my best friend from college, now a software engineer. "Maya," I said after explaining everything, "I need your help. It's serious. It's about my daughter." Maya didn't ask much. She simply said, "Give me that stuffed bunny. I'll take care of the rest." 2 days later, Maya returned the familiar pink bunny. It looked exactly the same, every stitch untouched. But inside now was a tiny camera, recording up to 4 hours continuously when activated, with live feed streaming through an app Maya had installed on my phone. I stared at the bunny, emotions churning. No one ever wants to use something like this on their own family. But I knew the truth was the only thing that could protect Lily. Saturday morning, I called my mother. Her voice was as cold as ever. "Stephanie, I thought you weren't going to call back. You're blowing everything out of proportion." I kept my tone steady. "I have an urgent event tomorrow morning, a pastry conference with a big client. Can you watch Lily for a few hours?" She paused for a moment, then said, "Fine. Bring her over at 9. Benjamin will be home too." After the call, I sat quietly in the kitchen, the bunny lying in front of me. Lily walked out of her room, yawning, her hair messy. I knelt down and brushed it behind her ear. "Lily, today you need to go to Grandma's for a little while." "But this time—" "Mommy will be close." She looked at me, uncertain. I picked up the bunny and placed it in her hands. "Today, Bunny has a special mission. It's going to help Mommy know what's happening around you, even when I'm not there." Lily hugged the bunny tighter. "It can talk to you?" I nodded. "Yes, in its own way. Just keep it close, and Mommy will know you're okay." When I dropped Lily off, Olivia opened the door, looking reluctant. "Let's hope you don't cause another scene this time." I didn't respond. I just leaned down, kissed Lily's forehead, and whispered, "I'll be back for you soon." I didn't go far. Maya had helped me set up live streaming through the app. I sat in a cafe 3 blocks away, earbuds in, eyes locked on the screen. For the first 2 hours, everything seemed normal. Lily sat in the living room, coloring by the window. My mother occasionally walked by, and Olivia scrolled through her phone. But around noon, Benjamin appeared. He entered the frame, holding a toy car. "Why'd you bring that stupid thing?" His voice came out sharp. "Baby stuff." Lily flinched, clutching the bunny. "It's mine. Give it here." I said no. The footage shook slightly as Lily was pushed back. Benjamin leaned down, trying to snatch the bunny, but Lily held on tightly. "Stop it, please." Then, a loud thud. The sound of something hitting the wooden floor. I shot up from my seat, heart pounding. The image shook for a few seconds, then steadied. Lily was sitting on the floor, clutching her head, tears streaming down her face. Benjamin stood nearby, breathing heavily, then glanced away as if nothing had happened. I didn't wait another second. I grabbed my keys and ran straight to my mother's house. All I could think was, Lily had endured enough. And I wasn't letting her suffer one more minute. I don't remember how fast I drove, only that my hands trembled as I opened the car door, my heartbeat loud in my ears. When I got there, I rushed up the steps without knocking. The door flew open as I turned the knob. My mother was standing there, shocked. "Stephanie, what's going on? Why are you—" "Where's Lily?" I cut her off, eyes locked on the stairs. "She's in the room with Benjamin." But I had already passed her, not letting her say another word. I ran straight to the living room, the place I had just seen on screen. The door was open, and there was Lily, sitting on the floor alone, clutching her bunny, eyes red and cheeks streaked with tears. Benjamin stood by the bookshelf, hands in his pockets, like nothing had happened. "Lily?" I rushed over and pulled her into my arms. Her whole body trembled. "I'm okay, Mommy," she whispered. I turned to Benjamin, staring him down. "What did you do to my daughter?" He shrugged. "She wouldn't let me see the bunny, that's all." Just then, Olivia walked in, likely drawn by the noise. "Stephanie, what is going on? Why are you yelling?" I stood up, holding Lily tightly, eyes fixed on her. "You know what's been happening. And I have proof." Olivia froze. "What proof?" I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the video from Maya's app. The footage was clear, the voices unmistakable. Benjamin pushing Lily, grabbing at the bunny, then walking away coldly. My daughter's sobs echoed in the quiet room. Olivia's face went pale, but instead of apologizing, she pressed her lips together and snapped. "He's just a kid, Stephanie. Kids fight over toys all the time. Why do you always overreact?" I couldn't hold back anymore. "Fighting over toys doesn't send a child to the hospital needing stitches, and you call that nothing?" My mother stormed in, voice sharp. "Stephanie, are you accusing your own family over a childish scuffle? Nothing serious happened." I turned sharply to face her. "Nothing serious? Do you know she's traumatized, can't sleep, too scared to speak up because someone made her feel threatened? I've stayed silent too long, but not anymore." I looked at Olivia, my voice firmer than ever. You were in this house when Benjamin did it, and you did nothing. You covered for him instead of protecting her. You're tearing this family apart, Stephanie, Olivia snapped, all over a few scratches. I clenched my fists. I'm not the one tearing it apart. It's the ones who ignored what was wrong that did that. I carried Lily to the car in the thick, tense silence of the house. As I shut the door behind me, I didn't look back. I knew then that, from that moment on, everything had changed forever. When we got home, I laid Lily down in bed. She fell asleep quickly, a deep sleep for the first time in days. I sat beside her, gently brushing her soft hair, feeling like I had just made it through a storm. That night, I sent the full recording to Dr. Morgan and Child Protective Services. I didn't need promises or pity. I needed justice for my daughter. I knew the battle wasn't over, but I finally had what I needed to begin. Less than 24 hours later, a social worker called me. We've reviewed the video. We're opening a formal investigation into the situation at Ms. Eleanor's residence. For now, all contact between Lily and the maternal side of the family will be suspended until a final decision is reached. I exhaled, knowing there was still a long road ahead. But at least this time, I wasn't walking it alone. I looked back at Lily, peacefully asleep, holding her stuffed bunny in her arms. That tiny girl had endured more than anyone ever should. But from now on, I would be her strongest shield. I whispered, "We're not going back there again, sweetheart, I promise." 3 days after I sent the video recorded by the bunny, the formal investigation was launched. A representative from Oregon Child Protective Services contacted me on Tuesday morning, informing me that interviews would be conducted with everyone in my family. My mother, Olivia, Benjamin, and Lily, with a child psychologist present. The interviews took place at the Multnomah County Social Services office. I sat beside Lily in a bright room with drawings on the walls. A caseworker named Julia, with gentle eyes and a warm voice, knelt down to Lily's level. "You can tell me anything you want, sweetie. No one can hurt you here, okay?" Lily looked at me for a second, then gave a small nod. I stepped out, my chest tight, but I knew this was a necessary step to help my daughter find her voice. That afternoon, I was invited back to hear the preliminary findings. Julia looked at me seriously. Lily confirmed that Benjamin repeatedly pushed her, took her toys, and threatened her when adults weren't around. She said that when she tried to tell someone, both Aunt Olivia and Grandma told her to stay quiet because Benjamin didn't mean it, and that kids have to learn to share. A chill ran down my spine. Julia continued. With the video evidence, Lily's account, and Dr. Morgan's report, we have sufficient grounds to intervene. Tomorrow, the police will be officially interviewing Ms. Eleanor and Ms. Olivia. The next morning, I received a call from Inspector Martin, the officer assigned to the case. We've completed initial statements. Benjamin has been temporarily placed in a special adolescent counseling center. During treatment, he won't have any contact with Lily. I let out a long breath. Finally, a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. Later that day, police arrived at my mother's house with a court order. My mother was charged with neglectful supervision of a minor, while Olivia faced accusations of ignoring harmful behavior by a child in her care. Neither was taken into custody, but both were ordered to attend a 6-month family rehabilitation counseling program and complete 120 hours of community service. I knew no punishment could erase what Lily had endured, but this was the beginning, where the truth was finally being heard. As for Benjamin, he was transferred to a child psychology center in Eugene, about a 2-hour drive from Portland. There, he would receive therapy 3 times a week, focusing on behavior management and emotional processing. The things Lily had suffered, though caused by another child, were still red flags that called for early intervention. A week later, I received a court notice officially granting me sole custody of Lily. All visitation rights from the maternal side of the family were indefinitely suspended. As I left the courtroom, Lily's small hand in mine, I felt like I had finally shaken off a weight that had been pressing on me for far too long. My mother tried to reach out a few times after that. She left voice messages, sounding softer than before. "Stephanie, I know you're upset, but we're still family. I listened to them all, but I didn't reply. For the first time in years, I chose silence, not out of fear, but because I no longer owed anyone my pain. Lily returned to school, closely monitored by a school counselor. She also met with a therapist weekly, and I started seeing her smile again. One afternoon, while I was making dinner, she tugged on my hand and pointed toward the pink tulips in the front yard. "Mommy, guess what? I'm not scared anymore." I bent down and hugged her tightly. "Me neither. We made it, sweetheart. Our story isn't over." But through it all, I've learned this. Even in a world that sometimes turns away from the truth, there's still light. If you're brave enough to walk through the darkness. And now, I'm not just a mother protecting her child. I'm the one who brought the truth into the light, because my little girl deserves to live in safety and love. Spring arrived late in Portland, bringing gentle rain and the soft scent of cherry blossoms drifting through quiet streets. Lily had grown more stable after 3 months of consistent therapy with Dr. Rachel Bennett. Twice a week, I took her to the counseling center, where the rooms were filled with color, dolls, drawings, and stuffed animals. There, Lily didn't have to speak unless she was ready. She could draw, play, and let her emotions speak for her. "She's responding very well," Dr. Bennett told me during a recent session. "There's still fear underneath, but Lily is learning to name her feelings. That's a critical first step toward healing." I watched Lily through the one-way mirror. She was stacking blocks, giggling softly when she got them to fit. My throat tightened. Every smile she shared now felt like a victory. A small one, but powerful enough to make me stronger each day. Our lives began a new chapter, too. I had decided to sell the small apartment near the bakery, the first home we shared, but also the place tied to so much uncertainty. With years of savings from the business and a grant from the Oregon Single Parent Assistance Fund, thanks to Lily's special case, I was able to buy a small house in the southern suburbs. Quiet, with a yard and a big maple tree out front. Lily squealed the first time she stepped inside. "Mommy, real grass!" "Can I plant flowers?" I smiled. "Of course. We'll plant tulips, like we had in front of the bakery. Remember?" She nodded eagerly. That night, Lily fell asleep earlier than usual. She still hugged her stuffed bunny. Just a toy now, no longer a secret guardian. And I stood on the porch, watching the light from her bedroom window, my heart strangely at peace. I also started writing. Late at night, after closing the shop and tucking Lily in, I sat at my laptop, recounting our journey. Every step, every wound, every decision. Not to reopen the pain, but so other mothers lost in the dark might see they are not alone. A month later, I received an invitation from Safe Steps Oregon, an organization that supports families with emotionally traumatized children. They had read my personal blog, where I shared Lily's story with honesty and courage. They wanted me to speak at their annual panel for parents and child psychology professionals. I hesitated at first. Public speaking was never my strength. But then I looked at Lily, now braver, raising her hand in class, expressing her feelings without fear. I realized I had to step out of my comfort zone too, just as my daughter does every day. The first talk took place at a community library. I stood on a small stage under soft lighting. In front of me were dozens of faces, fathers holding their children, mothers quietly wiping away tears. I shared my journey, without embellishment, without judgment. I spoke about the initial doubt, the pain of discovering the truth, and the strength that rose from unconditional love. At the end, a young woman came up to me. She held my hand, eyes red. "Your story made me realize I need to speak up too. Thank you." I held her hand and gently said, "We're all stronger than we think." Over the next month, I received more invitations from schools, parent support groups, even a local radio station. I was no longer just the mom who baked and stayed behind the counter. I was Stephanie, a mother who fought back, who stood up, and who chose truth over silence. Every morning, Lily and I watered the garden. We planted tomatoes, chrysanthemums, and a little lavender bush. One afternoon, while washing her hands in the backyard, Lily whispered, "Mommy, I'm not scared anymore. I know no matter what happens, you'll believe me." I pulled her into my arms, feeling her little heart beating steadily against mine. "That's right, sweetheart. I will always believe you, and I'll always be by your side." In the early summer sunlight, one thing became clearer than ever. We didn't just survive the storm. We learned how to live stronger after the rain. June came with golden sunshine stretching across the backyard of our new home. Lily excitedly counted down the days to her 9th birthday. She'd already prepared invitations, picked out balloon colors, and even made a list of cakes she wanted me to bake. "I want a 3-tier chocolate cake with rainbow sprinkles on top," she said, her eyes shining. I nodded, smiling. "Mom's got that covered. Your job is to pick the party's first song." That morning, I was busy decorating the yard when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and froze. My mother, Eleanor, stood there, holding a small gift wrapped in soft floral paper. She wore a light gray dress, her hair neatly tied back, and for the first time in a long time, her eyes didn't hold that usual look of judgment. "Hi, Stephanie," she said gently, a bit hesitant. "I know today is Lily's birthday. I didn't expect to be invited, but I brought her something." I looked at the gift, a swirl of emotions rising inside me. "How did you even know? Did you forget I still keep all the grandkids' birthdays on my calendar?" She gave a sad smile. "At first I thought I was right, that you were overreacting, placing blame. But after several sessions of mandatory counseling, I've realized there are things we just can't keep denying." I took the gift without saying anything. She hesitated, then turned to leave, but just as she stepped off the porch, Lily ran out from inside. "Mommy, who's—" She stopped when she saw her grandmother. The two of them looked at each other in a long silence. Eleanor bent down and said softly, "Happy birthday, Lily. I'm very sorry I didn't protect you." Lily didn't respond, but after she walked away, my daughter tugged on my sleeve. "Can I open Grandma's gift?" I nodded. Inside was a hand-knitted lavender-colored shawl, Lily's favorite color. The stitches were uneven, clearly made by someone inexperienced, but that made it all the more special. "Grandma made this for me?" Lily asked, eyes wide. I nodded. "I think so, sweetheart." Lily hugged the shawl and smiled faintly. "Then I'll keep it, but I'm still not ready to see her much. I'm just not mad anymore." I wrapped my arms around her. "You don't have to forgive if you're not ready. As long as you feel safe, that's all that matters." Meanwhile, Olivia had stayed silent for months. After the court hearing, she was restricted from unsupervised contact with Benjamin. Temporary custody was granted to his father, and she could only visit him once a week under supervision. She never called me, never apologized. To her, I was the one who had betrayed the family. But I didn't need an apology. I didn't need validation. Because I knew what I did was right. That afternoon, Lily's small party took place under the soft golden sun. A few neighborhood kids ran around the yard, laughter echoing through the air. Lily wore a floral dress she picked out herself, the new purple shawl draped around her shoulders. When I brought out the cake, everyone clapped and cheered. Lily closed her eyes, made a wish, and blew out the candles to a chorus of joy. Later, as most guests had gone, Lily sat on the steps holding her old stuffed bunny, now faded and fraying at the ears. "You know what?" she whispered, gazing up at the sky. "I'm not scared anymore." I turned to her and took her hand. "I think that bunny helped me be brave. It stayed with me even when I couldn't say anything, but now I know I have you. And you'll hear me, even if I stay quiet." I held her close, my heart melting with emotion. "We're really strong girls, aren't we, Mommy?" Lily looked up at me. I kissed her forehead and whispered, Yes, sweetheart, we're very strong girls. A soft breeze blew through, carrying the scent of lavender from the backyard. I looked around our new home, at my daughter, who had walked through fear with quiet courage, and I knew that while this journey hadn't been easy, we had come through it. And from now on, we wouldn't just live, we would live freely, fully, and with love. From our story, I've come to understand that silence is never the way to protect those we love. Sometimes, to protect a child, you have to stand up to even those closest to you. I used to fear judgment, used to question myself. But I've learned, being a mother isn't just about love. It's about having the courage to fight for your child's safety and voice. Now I believe every mother can become a fortress, if she's willing to step through that first fear. What do you think about Stephanie and Lily's journey? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss more emotional stories and powerful lessons about family, love, and courage in life.